I was picking up my daughters from dance the other day, having a chat to one of the other parents. And I said something that I would have absolutely landed in Australia. And here, it just sort of died. And it wasn't offensive or it wasn't anything awkward. It was just the fact that no one reacted. And it made me realise Australian humour doesn't always travel the way that you think it does. And the weird part is, it's not really that completely different. It's just not heard the same way.
You better take cover.
Growing up in Australia, you don't really think about humour. You just talk. You joke. You take the piss. But you move on. But once you live somewhere else, and that for me is here in Tennessee, you really start noticing that same sentence can land completely differently somewhere else. Now, self-deprecation is probably the biggest one. And in Australia, if something goes well, your natural instinct is just to play it down. You don't lean into it. You don't build it up at all. You just sort of soften it. It's like someone might say, that was really good. And you'll go, oh yeah, wasn't bad. And that is completely normal. No one questions it. No one tries to correct you at all. It's just how we talk. But overseas, that lands differently. People take you at face value. So you say something like that here in the States and they'll go, oh, well, I thought it was really good. Like they're trying to reassure you. And after a while, you start noticing you're not really making a joke anymore. You're just kind of downplaying yourself in a way that doesn't quite translate. And it's not just self-deprecation either. Australian sarcasm is dangerously convincing. We don't really change tone when we do it. We don't wink. We just say it completely straight out. Yeah, my kids still don't fully understand sarcasm. I think they're probably still a little bit too young for it. So sometimes I'll say something completely ridiculous, completely deadpan, and they'll just stare at me, like trying to work out if I'm serious or not. And honestly, sometimes I forget that doesn't always translate outside of Australia either. Because back home, people usually catch it straight away. You don't have to explain sarcasm. People just kind of know it. But overseas, again, that lands differently. You'll say something sarcastic, completely flat, and people will take you completely seriously. By the time you realise the conversation's already moved on, and you're standing there thinking, oh crap, now they actually think I did date Kylie Minogue. And that's probably the thing about Australian humour, because it's all about tone and timing and context. And if one of those things is missing, the whole thing changes. You especially notice that with people that you're close to, because back home, if you really like someone, you don't usually build them up. You sort of chip away at them a bit by bit, and not in a nasty way, really just enough to remind them not to get too comfortable. And the closer that you are to someone, the worse it usually gets. Like if one of your mates gets a new girlfriend, there is absolutely no chance that he's getting a normal reaction. No way. No one's saying, oh, mate, so happy for you. Instead, within about 5 seconds, someone's going, well, did she lose a bet? She doesn't know about you yet, mate, does she? And the worse that the joke is, the more likely it means people actually like the guy, which is the weird part. Because in Australia, taking the piss out of your mates is usually a sign of affection. If nobody's teasing you, that's probably more concerning. And Australians are very good at finding the one thing about you that you are hoping no one would notice, and then making that your identity for the next 20 years. But overseas, you're not used to it. It can sound genuinely harsh, because without that shared understanding underneath it, it just sounds like someone's being a bit of a dick. And I have noticed that over here sometimes I'll say something I think is obviously lighthearted, And then I'll immediately realise, oh crap, that sounded way harsher than what I meant to. Now, in Australia, the joke usually is the affection, but if you didn't grow up around it, you just hear the words. Now, we also have this habit of underselling everything. Something can be going genuinely bad, and an Australian will describe it kind of like it's a mild inconvenience. Now, like someone will walk in all drenched from the rain and go, oh yeah, bit wet out there, eh? Or something breaks, something really expensive. And the response is, well, that wasn't ideal. Now, growing up around that, you don't really notice it. Walk in from the heat, bit hot out there, mate, eh? That's just normal communication. No one panics. Nobody overacts. You sort of flatten everything. But overseas, people tend to take you more literally. So you'll describe something in that really understated Australian way, and they don't realise how serious you actually are. I've caught myself doing it here. Someone will ask how something's going, and I'll give what feels like a pretty normal Australian answer, and then realise halfway through, yeah, okay, they think that this is just a minor issue now. And there's this instinct to kind of soften things, even when things are going badly. You still try to make it sound manageable, because culturally, there's something very Australian about acting like everything's under control, even when it absolutely isn't. Now, this next one probably took me a while to notice, but Australians are very quick to cut through anything that feels a bit too much. If someone's trying a bit too hard or sounding a bit too polished, talking themselves up a bit, Aussies will usually bring it back down pretty quickly. Not really in an aggressive way, but it's just enough. Not like someone starts taking themselves a little bit too seriously, and within about 30 seconds, one of their mates will go, yeah, righto, mate. And everyone immediately understands what that means. Or someone uses one really big word and suddenly that becomes the joke for the rest of the day. It's funny because Australians actually respect competence a lot, but people just don't like performance. There's an unspoken rule that you're allowed to be good at something, but you're just not supposed to carry on about it. When you grow up around that, you don't really even notice it happening. It all just feels normal. You keep each other grounded. But in America especially, I've realised that people are often much more comfortable openly talking about their achievements, selling themselves. And Australians who hear that will be like, righto, mate. And when you grow up around that, you stop hearing it as criticism. It just sounds like familiarity. Now, none of this is wrong, by the way. It's just completely different settings. Same language, slightly different meaning. And the strange thing about this is that after you live away from it from a while, you start adjusting as well without even really noticing. Like I've caught myself doing it the other way now too. I'll soften things a bit more, explain myself maybe a little bit too clearly. Sometimes I'll even catch myself pulling back on a joke halfway through just to make sure that it lands properly. Then I go back to Australia and realise that I sound a bit too serious. Like everyone else is still speaking the old rhythm and I'm half a step out with how things are. Kind of like I've missed the joke slightly, even though I understand it perfectly. I think that's one of the weirdest parts of living overseas because you don't notice yourself changing while it's all happening. You only notice it when you go back home. Honestly, I probably end up talking about this kind of thing more on the podcast than anywhere else. It's just those little moments when you realise that you've changed slightly without even meaning to. Now, I don't think Australian humour is confusing. I think it just relies on sharing understanding, tone, timing, context, tiny little things that you don't even notice until suddenly nobody laughs. And once you've lived somewhere else, you realise how much of it isn't what you say, it's how people expect to hear it. And that's probably the biggest thing I didn't expect. Not just learning a new culture by living away, But realising your own doesn't always translate either. Hooroo, mateys.
You better take cover.